Tēnā koutou, tēnā tātou katoa. Welcome everyone to the most unusual Sunday service I've ever been involved in. Welcome especially to Nikki Kaye. When I announced about 5 weeks ago that the topic of our service today would be, should we be offering quarantine hospitality to Chinese students, that topic was inspired by a media report of Nikki Kaye saying we should care about Chinese students. Some of them are facing hostility from their landlords because of the COVID emergency. I agreed to do this and began researching the subject, but I could not find any other articles on that topic at all. I asked the question to the Ministry of Health helpline. The official said they didn't know about that subject. It dawned on me that the only source of this story was going to be Nikki herself, and I was surprised and delighted that she said yes. We have met today with only a small congregation because our church management committee voted to have no services at all until they can develop an internet outlook for our ideas. So this recording will be the first instalment of that series. A major part of our ritual here is lighting the chalice, so that will be our only act of worship today. The questions we were planning to ask Nikki was, would it be a good idea for churches and other groups to offer accommodation for Chinese students in New Zealand? Would it be a good idea for churches to offer places of self-isolation for students and other travellers so they can be isolated and can be reported to immigration if they break their isolation? We accept migrants from the Pacific. Would it be a good idea to provide an exception for parts of China, which are now leading the world in their management of Covid-19? Well, that agenda has been cut short because Nikki is very busy on other issues relating to coronavirus, and so I'm happy to ask her to tell us about them. It's better to light one candle than to curse the darkness. Better to let your bright light show where you stand, for its glow will melt the dark night like the coming of a new dawn, and hope will be kindled with that small flame in your hand. But if you stand up and leave your fears behind, you will show a light for those who are behind. It will spread from heart to heart, a light that cannot be ignored, for the spirit in your mind is the candle of the Lord.
Well, good morning. Firstly, can I just acknowledge the invitation to be here, to be talking to people on a Sunday. I think the first thing that I would say is I want to say thank you to a whole lot of people, not only in New Zealand, but internationally, that are on the front line fighting coronavirus. And those people include health workers, they include educators, they include people of faith that are doing everything possible to prevent loss of life and stop people from getting ill. What do we know and what don't we know? You know, I'm a former Minister of Civil Defence, and one of the things that I learnt in the role is that often situations evolve very, very rapidly. And just to acknowledge the government and the Prime Minister at this time, they are dealing with an unprecedented situation. We have a situation where we have a number of countries in lockdown, we have a number of countries with restricted movement, and in many countries we have thousands of people who have died. And so what we know is that globally, this is a significant challenge. We know that globally, people are dying and that people are getting ill. We know that people are working urgently on the opportunity to get a vaccine. We know that New Zealand is not immune to this situation. The reality is measures have been taken, including restricting our borders, effectively closure for everyone but New Zealanders and residents. But as we move through this time, and the Prime Minister announced an emergency framework yesterday, the balance for someone like me is I'm really doing 5 jobs. The first is, as National's education spokesperson, I have a role to support the Minister of Education, and that's what I've done at the outset of this. I've said, whatever you need, this is not about the left and right, it is about doing everything possible for Team New Zealand. I will do to help you. To do that, but at the same time, there is a moral obligation for the opposition in a gentle way to be able to, in the lens of history, have asked the right questions. Because when you look at major emergencies and disasters, often there are situations whereby people were all thinking the same thing, but they didn't speak up. And one of the things that I am worried about, and we're trying to work through together, is the fact that New Zealand has one of the lowest sort of testing operations in the world. So this issue of what is potentially community transmission? Where are we on the curve? These are legitimate questions to ask because it impacts, if you imagine at an hourly or daily level, our potential response. And so we are trying to work with the government, but also putting that gentle pressure on to say, are we doing everything possible to fight this virus? That's one job that I have. I'm sport and recreation spokesperson, so you can imagine most of our sporting organisations and the major sporting codes are in a very difficult situation. It has flow-on impacts and mental health. It has a range of impacts. As MP for Auckland Central, I am, again, working around the clock. I've got constituents stuck in parts of the world because they can't get back. Their partners may be stuck because they are on work visas. I've got situations whereby I'm just got off the phone to a range of people around the city mission and homelessness in central Auckland, because if you can imagine a situation like this, one of the key things in dealing with this is thinking about our most vulnerable. So the Prime Minister announced yesterday restricted movement for people over 70, but who are also immunocompromised. But also as a local MP, I am working through to help the government, but also our most vulnerable, what actions I can help take to support people who are homeless. So we are looking at trying to find self-isolation facilities for people who are homeless. The City Mission have said to me they have a need because you can imagine there are a number of volunteers that are scared or maybe older or maybe immunocompromised to help them in their non-contact centre for food distribution. So we're working through that. I'm also the Member of Parliament for Waiheke and Great Barrier Island. So you can imagine the response for isolated islands in a situation like this. There are a range of very complex factors that have to be taken into account. So yesterday I was on Waiheke, I think it was yesterday, dealing and walking around and talking to the pharmacy who are dealing with situations around people potentially stockpiling. So it's really important, anyone out there, the messages that the Prime Minister sent yesterday about being kind and fair is very important in terms of food, but also in terms of access to medicines. We have situations around our ferries, dealing with people who may be self-isolating compared to the rest of the public. So I've been working with Auckland Transport in that area. So look, it is going to be an incredibly busy time for health workers, educators, potentially obviously civic leaders, our churches. And I think I reflect on a few things that I've learnt in life. And one of them is by my grandmother who passed away a number of years ago. And she was, I used to call her Gandalf, a wise grandmother. But she lived through wars, her son dying, many different traumatic things in her life. And she had enormous faith in humankind and our ability to be resilient, to be generous and to help people. which is why I have extraordinary faith in our religious leaders and people involved in the churches to be there for some of our most vulnerable at a time like this. I think I reflect on a couple of other things, that we will need to support our health workers through this. They are the front line, and across the world we have seen people who have been scared. We have seen people who they're disproportionately impacted as a result of the virus, and so we're going to have to do everything possible to ensure that they are as well supported as they possibly can be. So thank you very much for inviting me here today. The reason that I'm not staying a very long time is that I need to get back to what I consider as the front line to ensure that we are doing everything possible to fight this virus.
Thank you very much, Nikki. We really appreciate you coming, and we will be discussing some of the things you've been saying afterwards. We apologise for our very small congregation, but this church too is in lockdown, and this will be our substitute for a church service today. Thank you very much indeed.
Thank you very much, and if I can just reiterate that I just am so grateful for everybody, including yourselves, that are thinking about how we can do things separate to the government, because the government only has an amount of resources. So every single bit that other people step up, whether it's volunteering, whether it's housing for self-isolation, will make a huge difference and, in my view, save lives. Thank you. Thank you.
We extinguish this flame, but not the light of truth, the warmth of community, or the fire of commitment. These we carry in our hearts until we are together again. For my closing words, I'm using a quotation from the Jewish prophet Isaiah, who famously said, "A young woman shall conceive and bear a son, and shall call him Emmanuel," which means God is with us. The Jews would say that this was not talking about Jesus, it was talking about Jerusalem being besieged by enemy soldiers, and saying a sign of hope would be a young woman nurturing a child. She would be defying the enemy and looking forward to a time when the enemy would give up and go home. In that case, the enemy did go home, frightened by a plague.